if you fucking call me chef again, I'm gonna cry so hard. You know what I mean? Like telling the story, I try to hold it together, telling this story to me to this day.
Yeah, you almost got me, but I
Yeah,
recovered.
right. She really did treat me like a human being, man.
Some stories aren't just about building a business, they're about rebuilding a life. Jason Vickers is a Seattle based chef and a member of the Hassanamisco Band of the Nipmuc Nation, and his path to where he sits today is one of the most honest and inspiring reinvention stories you'll hear. He's cooked alongside some of the Pacific Northwest's most celebrated chefs, names like Kathy Casey, Tamara Murphy, and Scott Staples. He's been featured in Seattle Magazine. And in 2023, he founded Natoncks Metsu, which translates to Feeding My Cousins, a catering, private chef, and meal prep business rooted in First Nations traditions, locally foraged ingredients, and centuries of Indigenous food culture. But before any of that, Jason faced homelessness, addiction, and a moment where everything had fallen apart. This is a story about what happens when you decide to start over and what's possible when you finally lean into who you really are. Jason, welcome to Hustle 50.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased and I'm grateful to be here, man.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. Where do I start? I'm out of breath from that intro because I didn't want to mess up any of the names. You
Hey,
know,
listen, I want to tell you, you did a great job.
I did my phonetic research, but it's like how we were talking before the show about how there's East Coast pronunciation and West Coast,
Right.
and you want to get it right, but you're not sure. You can do all the phonetic research possible. I am so excited about this interview, and I think other people should be too. And my main reason for that is I've watched your journey because we float in the same circles and have floated in the same sort of circles since 30 years ago.
Right.
Um, I've watched your ups and downs, and your latest up is just feels like it's just amazing to watch. It's so rich with what this show is all about, which is like taking action. You know, the show's called Hustle 50 for a reason. It's all that positive sort of action you can take in your own personal life, both spiritually, business, career stuff, the circles you surround yourself with. I just think that your story is just prime for anybody who wants to start their own thing, but specifically people who have thought about becoming a personal chef or tapping into that skill set that they have. You know, my wife, we've been together now for about 18 years, married for 16.
That's a
And when
victory, man.
it's amazing because it feels like just 5 years ago. But, you know, the thing is like when you get together with someone and they love to cook, you know, she was a good cook,
Yeah.
and she liked to cook most of the time. And you know, I know how to heat things up, but she's the chef and she's the chef in the house.
Yeah.
And over the years, she has just doubled down. Like every couple of years, she'll go to Spain and do like a cooking class for like a week, or she'll dive into learning how to make sauces. And it was when she learned how to like make the sauces, that's when everything really changed. And what I'm trying to say is like, you know, there's been times when I've said, babe, you've got like 10 to 15 dishes that I would eat every single week or every month that I knew your restaurant was open. And so anyway, I've just watched your journey just as a personal chef. It's super inspiring. And I also think it's really unique to this local Pacific Northwest region. And I just want more people to know about you. So I figured I'd bring you on, and I think it's going to be an awesome show. And I can't wait to hear more of your story. For anyone just hearing your name for the first time, who is Jason Vickers and what is Natoncks Metsu?
Well, thank you. I will offer a greeting, and I'll say Akuni, which means peace in my people's language. So Akuni. My name is Jason Vickers. My traditional name is a Homelessness, which means painting owl. I come from the Hassanamisco tribe of the Nipmuc people, the Hassanamisco tribe, the people of the lakes, rivers, and ponds. So I'm just inside from being coastal on the East Coast. My family's from what is now central Massachusetts. And we were talking a little earlier and having a little bit of fun with some pronunciation and some words. I'm going to share one more with you. My family comes from a place called, and this is a very, and I'll actually, Rory, I'll send you a picture of this after we're done so that you can maybe share it so folks can get a look at it and get a kind of a little
Awesome.
kick out of it. It's called Lake Manchaga, Chargaga, Chunga, Gunga, Bungamog. It's a real name, and it's so long that on the street sign, it's a rainbow over the
Right.
top. Underneath, it's
Right.
the home of the Nipmuc Indians. Um,
Yeah, I think I heard you say this previously because I watched you on another podcast
yeah,
of some friends of ours
yeah,
over on Table 18,
that's
and
right.
I saw that, and at first I was like, "It's not real." Oh, it is real. Yep,
Yeah,
it is. And
yeah.
you know why I believed it really fast was I lived in Maui for a year and a half, and
Yeah.
some of their words over there, some of their native words are really long like that. So awesome. And
They're gorgeous,
so,
aren't they? These traditional languages with these sort of like flourishes of language. I mean, they're really gorgeous. I love traditional languages because they are so often a reflection of an interpretation of the beauty of like what's happening around them. You know, the language that the Lummi people use. There are a couple of terms that are really really interesting. The Lummi people, the term for frog is weckus.
Wekis.
Weckus, right? And it's incredible. That was shared with me at one point, and now every time I'm up in Bellingham and I hear this sort of like, because there's times at night where you'll hear this cacophony of frogs, and I'm looking over my shoulder, I'm like, Weckus. It's very cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we get into your story, I do want to know about the flagship business, Natoncks Metsu. So
Yeah.
please tell us about it and what we should know, like really quick highlights.
Sure. So Natoncks Metsu, in its essence, it literally, quite literally means feeding my cousins. And I have put about 30 plus years of experience in and around the world of food into presenting, talking about, and renewing the interest in kind of reviving knowledge and awareness of traditional foods.
Yeah,
You know, and
awesome.
feeding my cousins is not only the name, it's the mission statement. And
Yep.
living and moving in some of the circles that we're in, like, feeding my cousins can be obviously can be taking care of people with food. I'm grateful and proud to say that I have about a half a dozen employees, most of which are young Indigenous folks who are also formerly incarcerated folks who work with us.
Yep.
Um, but Natoncks Metsu, feeding my cousins, has meant a whole lot of different things over time. It has meant long talks at night with somebody who might not be doing so hot, and like just taking a little, it's like taking a little something and setting it aside just to take care of somebody in a number of special kind of ways that folks who live and work in some of the fields that we work in, like folks who are who are dealing with addiction, mental health, things
Yeah.
like this, or sometimes just straight up folks who are hungry and don't have anything to eat and like are having a hard time. I'm grateful to say that Natoncks Metsu has presented another opportunity to kind of pass it around.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, like a deeper spiritual feeding, not just literal, like I'll come feed you and bring you some food for the night at your fancy house
That's right.
or your event, but like our mission is to feed the soul as well as
Exactly.
the belly. And you've worked alongside some of the most respected chefs in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. Take us back. Where did your culinary journey start, and how did you build that career like in the early days?
Well, I will tell you that I started at 16 years old at a place called the Lemongrass Grill, this little Thai restaurant down on Green Lake, and there were these two little aunties in the back, and they were back there, and I went in, and all I could smell. I walked in the back door, and it was this wall of whoosh jasmine rice, just hit you like, and it was wow,
I
and the air.
remember it.
It's
I
a little
remember
different.
it.
That place was fantastic. And these two little aunties in the back, and they're cleaning peppers. And every now and then they'd pass me a little something to try. And I'd stand back in this little brick alcove and just wash dishes for dear life. And
Right.
I was a high school kid. I was going to John Marshall High School down the street. One of those high schools for kids who got kicked out of the other high schools.
Oh
And
yeah.
and it was my first chance at a job. But about a year after that, I went off. That was my first experience going off, and I left there in short order to go get clean for the first time,
Yeah.
just before I turned 17. And when I came back, my next opportunity to get a job, I got a job at a place called Lombardi's in Ballard.
Oh sure.
Yeah, so I worked at Lombardi's over there, and I worked for an Italian chef named Luigi Ruggiero, who was an opera singer. He looked just like Mario
Yep.
from the game, with the glasses and everything. And he was a really really wild character. But it was the first place that I worked where I saw guys who just they had a whole cast of characters. They had these punk rock guys and these old metalhead guys and these kind of burnt out old hippie guys. You know what I mean? And I remember asking this guy Phil where he was from, and he said, "None of your goddamn business." And I thought, oh, I like these guys. You know what I mean? Like they reminded me a lot of my uncles, and I fell in love with the pace and the energy of that kind of a place. And then I went to work. I went to work at the Edgewater and had a really great experience there. I worked at FX McRory's for a couple of years and
Sure.
and learned how to really cook for really high volume situations. That was great. That was when the Kingdome was around, right? So
Yep.
get 300 people accumulate at the door. The doors would open. 300 people are coming in and they're sitting at the bar, at the oyster bar, and at the kitchen, and they had an exhibition counter. So we would make an irresponsible amount of espresso, and we'd take our hats and soak them under the water and put them all in the freezer. So right before service, we put on all this stuff and get ready to go because it was also the height of summer, of course, and just hang on for dear life and just kind of fire everything. It was interesting watching those episodes of The Bear, in those moments
Oh
where there
yeah.
was chaos, and I was like, yeah, I know that moment for sure. And
Yeah.
eventually, I had the opportunity to go and work at Café Campagne in the Pike Place
Oh
Market.
my God. We love that place. We take staycations. We'll go to the I can't remember the name of the hotel right above it.
In at the market, yeah.
Inn at the Market. So we'll
Mhm.
go to the Inn at the Market. We'll pretend like we're Seattle tourists, and we always have Campagna for breakfast.
Yeah,
We love it for breakfast. Oh
so
my
great.
God, it's so good.
I mean, I loved working there so much. For me, it was my first chance to work at that level and have that kind of experience. And the chef at the time was Tamara Murphy. Tamara,
Yeah.
through another friend of mine's mother who was sort of socially friends with those folks. I got the opportunity to go in there and talk to her about getting a job, and
Didn't
she.
she, is she, I'm sorry for getting this right or wrong,
Mm,
but is she still with us?
she is actually no longer with us, and
Right. She
I'll
just passed. I
yeah.
I have good friends that are like in the PR food business, and I
Mm.
saw that she had passed, and it was really sad for a big community of folks that have worked with her and watched her career. And she was a big sort of like monument here in Seattle.
She's truly and will always truly be, and I'll share a little bit about this in a minute. One of my real heroes in life, and so at about 26 years old, I went into her kitchen and asked for a job, and she hired me along. She hired a couple of us in this little moment to work down in the cafe, and it was 2 weeks after she had just won the James Beard Award for Best Northwest Chef.
Oh, amazing.
And she looked at us all in the kitchen, and she was New York trained, and and I had worked for a couple of pretty tough chefs at that point, but she was we now chefs are in the media so much now. People are familiar with the concept of what tough chefs are. She was one of Bourdain's contemporaries and came from working literally
Yeah.
side by side with the man,
Yeah.
and friends, in fact, and came to Seattle, and within a couple of years was in this sort of renowned position. And she said, I just won the James Beard Award 2 weeks ago, and everyone's coming to see us.
Yeah.
Don't fuck this up for me. That's what she said. She really meant
It's
it.
and I believe it.
And we
I
were
believe
shaking in our boots. We were as kids. It's so interesting to see, like I said, watching the way kitchens are represented so much in the media now. She was very, very tough on us. She was a tough chef, and she pushed us. She pushed us to grow, and for a long time, she really didn't pull punches. She came in one day and she said, "Oh, your sauce looks pretty nice." And I looked up and I said, "Thank you," because I wasn't used to hearing that. And she was
Right.
like, "Don't get excited. That's probably the last compliment your ass is going to hear for a long time." And I
You
was
know,
like,
what's funny? So people know me in Seattle as like a web design guy, web
"Yeah,
marketing guy, ad management guy, but my first 10 years of work was in restaurants.
yeah,
I cut my teeth washing dishes, and then I was a pantry chef, and
yeah."
then I was, and I worked my way
You've got that
through.
vibe, Rory. Like that, like to know you and to be in your company, to talk to you about it. You can tell when someone has the gene. You know what I mean?
Right. But I totally relate to this idea of a cast of characters. I remember when I first worked, I worked at this place down on the water on Shoal Shoal, It's no longer there, but there it was kind of a fine dining place above Charlie's. And
Yeah.
their head chef was this crazy, like 6'8" Iranian guy.
Yeah.
And he listened to like Black Sabbath albums on 10 in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and just a bunch of crazy people, like super intimidating, but really knew what
Yeah.
the hell they were doing.
That's right. That part.
And, eventually I turned 18 and realized, oh, I can do better in the front of the house. But I had 4 years, 5 years in the back. And when I read Kitchen Confidential for the first time by Anthony Bourdain, it blew my mind how I felt like he knew me. I just totally understood what he was talking about. And there's such a rich culture. It's almost like a subculture within a culture in the restaurant business, because
Yeah.
it's not like any other kind of work. And when it hits you, when it's time to go, it's like going to war. I mean, not that I would know what that's like, but you know what I mean. It's like
I
you're
absolutely
you're
do.
going you're going
Yeah.
into a battle, and you're either
That's
going to
right.
be defeated or not. Like, you're never
It's
going
so
to
real.
win. You're never
That's
going to
right.
win. You're just not going to lose today,
Well, the
right?
beautiful thing about working in the restaurant business at that time, the beautiful thing about being a line cook for us, it was you could complete a circle in a day. And what I mean by
Right.
that is you come in, you come in at 1 or 2 because you want to make sure you got your shit together, and you prep and you prep and you prep, and the prep people have been there since the morning, kind of getting you ready to go,
Yep.
and you get everything ready. You get your station set up, and like like your life depends on being ready for service at 5 o'clock. When chef
Yeah.
comes in the door and walks down the line and like checks your stuff, looks at your knife work, tastes your sauce, you know what I mean? Like, boy, you better have your shit together.
Right. Yeah.
And once that happens, they start seating. You start getting tickets, and the next thing you know, and everything ramps up, and you go and you go and you go, and the next thing you know, you're in the midst of this incredibly intense thing. It's about 6:30. It's really getting going, and it stays like that until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. The next thing you know, like these hours have gone by, and all this stuff that you prepared during the day, like you've exhausted it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But also at the end of the night, you've completed a cycle. That's the deal. It's
Totally.
like, and there's something so satisfying about that.
It's
You
for
know?
sure a workout, both
Oh, that's for
physically
sure.
and mentally.
Yeah.
And I remember when I because I had been in the back of the house and I'd gone to the front, I had a little bit more like ability to bridge. Like when I screwed
Yeah.
up, my mistakes weren't yelled out as much because like I came from that side. Sometimes they were actually, I was criticized even more because it was like, hey man, what do you do? Like,
Yeah, what do you
like it,
you crossed over.
yeah, but most of the time, because I had
It's
those roots
funny.
in the back of the house, working the front of the house, which comes with its own sort of dance routine,
Oh boy.
was just, I think, a little bit easier.
Yeah.
I want to pivot here a little bit. There was a period in your life where things got really dark: homelessness, addiction, losing your footing. How much of that are you comfortable talking about? And what do you want people to understand about that chapter?
Well,
Since it sort of precipitated where you're at today. Uh,
it's an important part of the story that exists now, and I will say that to say, not only as a person who moves in and exists in recovery circles, but who's had the opportunity to share my story. I will say, to a degree, I feel a responsibility to share a little bit of that story at times, especially for other folks who have some difficulties and challenges in that area. Regardless of where people are at, I mean, to be able to share something like that, and you know how this stuff works, to be able to share something with somebody where they can recognize that, oh, this person sitting across the table from me, like, knows what this is. Um, and to be able to be an example and say something to somebody that's just simple, like, hey, listen, all I need you to do is keep going.
yeah,
Just like keep going. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Whatever you're thinking about doing, like, whatever you're thinking about doing, that sounds kind of final. Like, please just give it another day. Just keep going, because you have
yeah,
there's no way to see right now, like what's possible. And so I say that to say, I'll share like this. I grew up watching a lot of the adults in my family fall apart as they moved out into the world.
yeah,
Addiction and alcoholism were really, really thick and really, really powerful on both sides of my family. My Indigenous side, through my father's lineage, and my Italian side through my mother's lineage. And I mean, I quite literally like watched the men in my family grow up and fall apart. Like it was like they were walking down the street and you could see them kind of fading in like the end of a movie. You know what I mean? Like they start to become transparent and like their arms would they just disappear. And what happened was, it was crime and addiction and incarceration and ultimately overdoses and death and so many people in my family on both sides. I have several relatives here who we tried over the years to move out to Washington State from back east to that are permanently incarcerated here with life sentences for things that give you life sentences, and also, like I said, folks who so many folks who have passed away from that stuff. So when that thread, I mean that thread started to touch my life right away when I was a kid, and
Hmm.
I struggled with it. Like I said before, I went to my first trip to treatment happened shortly before I turned 17, and I was a very early recovery teenage person,
Sure.
who when I took my first restaurant job and coming from that, like, and it really, like, it was such a hand in glove experience, like the energy and sort of the barely controlled chaos, like to be able to be engaged in that was so stimulating for me. And like this is before we had a lot of conversations about attention deficit and things like this,
Sure. Sure.
we
Sure.
were, I feel like we were just young and restless and like eager for something. And I found something in the restaurant business that really, like that really could contain that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and these ways of being that had like, drove my parents crazy, had gotten me in trouble with the law. Like I found a place where there was a way to take to take those ways of being, and Rory, man, they were embraced. You
Yep.
know what I mean? They were embraced, and not only they were embraced, and they were encouraged, and you would get you could get your flowers for that. People were like, "Hey, great job," or your ability to think and act under pressure, all these things, and um, but at the same time, that like I said, I embraced recovery at about 17. And at about age 22, city life came calling. A bunch of my friends were, we had been in recovery and we had kind of dipped our toes into it. A bunch of my friends were sort of blessed with the ability to spend a couple of years really kind of avid and active in recovery, and they left and kind of just got on with their lives, and they never picked
Yep.
up again. They never, but for me, I lasted about 2 months.
Right.
And in an undercover way, I was 22 years old. I secret way, like I started drinking and started using again, and it again blew up in my life at about 27 years old. It again blew up in my life. I mean, it happened over time. So I have three bottoms and recoveries in the story of me, and I say that to say, um, the reason that I'm still here is because I took long breaks. I had a period of sobriety that was 5 years. Then I was back out for 5 years. Then I was sober for about 7.5, almost 8 years. And then I spent about 10 years back. And that's when, well, a lot of the most difficult things happened. And now I'm grateful to say that I'm in my 10th year.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It's yeah,
That's amazing.
it's a beautiful thing, and I'm really grateful for that. But I will tell you that, after many, many years in the restaurant business and catering and working as a private chef, I found myself in a place, and I had traveled around the planet at this point. In about 2013, I had come from really a challenging breakup. I had a young child, with a person um, that we were kind of trying to figure out what co-parenting was, and I was still a little, I was still a little freaked out about being somebody's parent.
Yep.
Uh, because I didn't really have a template on how to share quite, like really how to,
Yeah.
like I ran and kind of lived my life for myself, and was just kind of trying to figure that out. And I was sober again from about 2000 till just about the end of 2007. And like, in fact,
Yeah.
in the very last few days of 2007, I had a situation. I was living out of town. I was living on a little tropical island off the coast of Honduras, and I was working as a chef. And it was this incredible situation. And I never in my life, if you would have told that same 17-year-old kid who was a dishwasher that this job would take him to places like this, there's no way I would have had even the ability to believe you. But at this
Yeah.
so I was living in Central America, working for this incredible little lodge where they paid me like $70 a day to cook lunch, make a couple of drinks, and kind of entertain as a bartender, and then make
Sure.
dinner for like 10 people. So for 10 people, that's $700 a day. If they're there for a week, that's $5,000. And I'm living in a place where it's 20 cents on the dollar.
Yeah,
And this
right.
lovely British couple owns it. Like he was a tennis pro, and she come from a wealthy family, and she would come and knock at my door and pay me in like bands of like U.S. cash with like brand new money, and I would take it and I kind of have try to find a place in my little apartment in the middle of the jungle to like hide this cash,
Right, right.
you know. And you go down and you would pay the immigration guy like I go down and see the immigration guy and now it's been a long time, but pay him a little bribe and he would stamp my passport, and you're good for another 3 months. And after about a year of that, I had a difficult separation. I picked up after 7.5 years sober, and then a few days later, my mother passed away. So I came back to Seattle after that and was kind of in a rough way, and I wasn't able to put together a significant sobriety again for a very long time.
Yeah.
And within about a year, I moved from Seattle to New York City and was living and kind of existing and kind of like exploring food in New York City. And I met someone there, and we ended up having a child. And I left New York City for Massachusetts, and all the time, the substance stuff was continued to be a real issue, and it kind of slowly grew under the surface. And at about 2013, I had a food truck, specializing in Turkish, Moroccan, Persian, and Egyptian food. It was called
Yeah.
Fez on Wheels for those from Seattle who might remember it.
Yep.
And we had it,
Yep.
and we were it was an incredible time, but uh my substance use was just growing and growing and growing under the surface until one day it exploded, and it just kind of tipped everything over, and it turned into something that like I was unable to participate in this business that had like my face on the side of a food truck. And I was my business partner and a handful of folks who we know who worked there, kind of asked me to kind of step out of the way until I could kind of get it together a bit. And I went from there into like I met somebody and we decided that we were Bonnie and Clyde and that we were gonna like Tom Sawyer, we were gonna go live our adventures out in the world. And it was a fantastic disaster, and for a
Right.
couple of years we really tried that. And then I ended up, of course, by myself, and I was a homeless person for I had gone from business owner and traveling chef to a guy who was like walking from Burien to White Center to Burien to White Center, you know
Right.
what I mean, to Burien, and then all the way downtown to Score again. And then you
Yep.
didn't, and for me it was meth use, and it was, and a lot of it was just, I walked away from a whole bunch of things to participate as fully as I could in that life. And I started getting locked up a lot, and just one thing led to another, and the ball started rolling really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And uh, in the midst of that, on one of my final attempts to kind of get it together, that same chef who won that James Beard Award, Tamara Murphy, reached out to me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you had somebody in your corner still during that time. And
Yeah.
so she had heard through the restaurant grapevine that you were struggling, gave you way back in.
Yeah.
Like, what did that moment mean to you and how did it change your trajectory?
So I'll tell you, man, she brought me to her restaurant, Terra Plata, which is still on Capitol Hill to this day,
Oh
still
yeah, yeah.
active.
We
And
love
she
that
said,
place.
"Oh, it's incredible. It's amazing." And so she brought me to Terra Plata. I had worked with her at Campagne, later at Brasa downtown on Third Avenue, if you remember
Mhm.
Brasa,
Sure.
and then back to Terra Plata. So I was definitely sort of a loyal devotee of what Tamara was doing. And I went to Terra Plata, and she brought me upstairs and she said, "I want you to do some work for me." I said, "Okay." And she said, "Chef." I said, "Yeah." She says, "I don't want you to cook for me. Like, I don't need you to touch food. I need you to refinish the deck up here on this rooftop. Summer's coming and we're gonna fill it up." She's like, "Do you think you can do that?" She said,
Yeah.
she said, "I'm never gonna give you more than," and here's, she's like, I'm not gonna bullshit you." She said, "I won't give you, like, I see you." And at the time I'm like 125 pounds,
Right. You're
uh,
not going to be allowed on the line right now, but she's going to help
yeah.
you and give you an opportunity to like get back to work.
She said, I won't give you more than $10 at a time. I'm going to give you this flip phone so you can talk to your kid and talk to people who love you. And I'm going to save up what I would have paid you. And when it's time to go somewhere, we're going to buy you some hygiene stuff and buy you some clothes when you finally can get your ass into, like, to get some help.
Amazing.
And sure enough, I worked week after week for her. And, I was an active. I was an alcoholic and an addict in my cups, and I was fully like living down on Third Avenue and doing everything that comes with that, and still showing up, showing up to work for her, and one night I came in and she said, chef, I want to bring you upstairs, and I want to share something with you, and she brought me upstairs, and that whole rooftop patio was empty, Rory, and there was a table, and it was a table for one and a chair, and there was a little vase with arrangement of flowers in it and a couple of glasses and like a proper table setting.
Mm.
And I'm going to tell you that I was sleeping in front of the 7-Eleven next to the McDonald's on Third Avenue, and most Seattleites know what that means and where that is.
Yeah.
And this person brought me into her restaurant, brought me upstairs, sat me at a table, and treated me like a fucking human being. And
Amazing.
she served me, yeah, she served me a salad. She brought me a drink, and she served this, her famous dish of pork and clams. And I have a photograph. She took a photograph of me and sent it to me later, and I'll share it with you later on if you're interested.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. We got to show the people what we gotta.
And she kept calling me chef, and it's a rooftop patio, and the city lights are all around, and she, in that night, with her all of her magic, she plucked me out of one world and put me in another place in my life, and gave me a glimpse and said, like, this is who I know you as. This is what I look at you. This is what I see. This thing you're doing is not you.
Yeah.
This is what I see. And she kept saying, chef, I believe in you. And she kept calling me. And in my head, I was like, if you fucking call me chef again, I'm gonna cry so hard. You know what I mean? Like, telling the story, I try to hold it together, telling this story to me to this day.
Yeah. You almost got me, but I
Yeah,
recovered.
right. And she really did treat me like a human being, man. And I say that to say, and I didn't stay sober right after that. That wasn't the end of my story, unfortunately. You know how this stuff works. Even
Yep.
even in powerful moments like that, these habits, these things that happen to us, can sometimes, they still outpace the power of love in that particular way. Which is why we need such a powerful way of taking care of ourselves on the other side of it, right? Um,
Well, and a lot of people hit a wall like that or hit a low like that, even after having some epic, beautiful grace just show up in their lives.
right.
What was the turning point for you? Like, what made you decide to stop and start rebuilding?
For me, it was November of 2016, and I woke up underneath the tree in front of Dick's on Broadway, and I walked over to, and I just gave a talk 2 weeks ago to a group of culinary students at Seattle Central, and where the bathrooms are situated. I told those kids, I said, I came into this building, November 23rd, 2016, and I came in and I used that bathroom right there, and I took a little bath, like
Right.
and uh and I went out, and the person I had slept next to keep warm had, taken off with everything that we had accumulated the day before. We had a Russian guy who, up in Aurora, who would take anything for 25 cents on the dollar as long as it had a tag on it. And so I had this suitcase full of stuff, and I came back out and it was gone. And I looked around and I was like, I don't even care.
Yeah.
I went to the QFC down the street, and I helped myself to a rotisserie chicken, a box of cocoa pebbles, a little jug of chocolate milk, and a big loaf of the Italian bread fresh from the bakery. And I hadn't eaten anything in days and days and days. So I sat down and proceeded to eat all of that. And then the coma that comes from being on a long run, and I
Yeah.
and I and I knew that I had to get somewhere, because I'd had that, that I've been in that scenario for a long time, and you can fall asleep and sleep for 2 or 3 days straight, and you can often wake up and something terrible will happen to you while you're unconscious, or I was
Mhm.
used to waking up with all my belongings gone. Like, if you wake up like that,
Right.
we used to call it being butt naked. You're gonna wake up butt naked. You're gonna have to go
Yeah.
get you're gonna have to start from the beginning. You have to go get yourself a backpack, and just, you're gonna have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And um and uh
So gnarly.
and I
So
went and I
gnarly.
that's right. And I lay down on the rubber floor mat behind the back door at Hot Mama's Kitchen in the parking garage for Seattle Central. I told those kids that too. I said it was right there. And I fell asleep. And I woke up that night at about 3 in the morning, and this police cruiser was making their way around inside there, and I was about 40, uh, was about 43 years old at that point, and I had been in the street doing this for about 4 years, and
Yeah.
I had done that as a young kid. At about 13, I fell to the street, and I fell back as an adult, like fully, like again trying to run away as an addict, as an addicted
Sure.
adult.
Sure.
And these two cops came around and they said, and no, there was when I got there, there were a bunch of people there, and these kids like gave me some cardboard, and this guy even gave me a blanket, and I just wrapped him and I laid down behind that door and truly like slept the sleep of the dead. So much
Yeah.
so that when I woke up, everybody else was gone, and these cops were irritated because they had been on their loudspeaker telling everyone to leave. And
Right.
slept through it until they pulled right up to me, and I sat there and I was like, I don't want to go anywhere, like
Yeah.
I mean, I heard him coming, but I was like, don't leave. Like, and I remember having the thought, like, if you don't just sit still and deal with this now, like you might not get another chance.
Yeah. Right.
And they asked me they asked me my name, and I said my name is Jason Vickers, and my DOC number is 377645, and I've been on the run for a long
Right.
time. To me, it's like this, I was like, I'm just gonna really tell them. And to then like, and they were like, oh, okay. And they got kind of hopped out, stood me up, turned me around, put my face on the car, and like they arrested me, and they took me in, and I slept like a baby. And the turnaround is better defined as like from there, I had what was called a drug offender sentence alternative, or a DOSA.
Yep.
So they sentenced me with the very generous, because I knew so many people in generations of my family had been sentenced without this kind of mercy. That like you did what you did because you were addicted and you were trying to take care of this.
Sure.
And so we're gonna assign you like wraparound services and treatment and things like this to try to help you kind of get out from underneath that. And I just I the help didn't quite work until the point where they had to sort of revoke that and take it away. So I knew when I put my hands out to those two cops that I was going to go to prison. And I remember being a little kid, and I really did have this fear based on like the experience of watching my uncles, that I would grow up and not know how to handle life as an adult, and I would become a bum. That was the term I used, or a hobo. Like with the bindle walking down the street with my,
Sure.
like I really saw that, and the other fear I had was that I would end up in prison.
Yep.
And so here I was. I had been homeless for a little over 4 years, and now I was on my way to the penitentiary. And I got to prison, and I made a commitment in that moment when those two cops were pulling up. I was like, we're gonna be done now. Like, which is, nothing in this, no, nothing special, nothing more than that. But like, we're gonna like this is the chance to draw a line, and we're gonna go ahead and accept the opportunity to do that.
That's
And
amazing. And I know that there's more to that story, but I want to still stay focused on keep it on track with, with your business and even though I know your story is rich with growth and opportunity and revelation and all that sort of thing. I do want to talk about your native culture. You said that getting sober also meant leaning into your native culture. Can you
absolutely.
talk about that connection? Like, how did sobriety and your heritage become intertwined, like in your recovery and your reinvention?
So for me, it's this. It started with, and interestingly enough, we can pick up right where we left off. Like my trip into incarceration, into prison. The interior of a prison is divided very clearly along racial lines.
Yeah.
And so I got in there, I had some relatives who had been incarcerated for a long time, some indigenous relatives. And
Right.
so I got there, it was like, well, he's over here with us. He's sitting down right here, and he's with us. And I have two uncles that are currently still in Clallam Bay that we go to see every year for the big gathering, and that we talk to. The last time I talked to my uncle was yesterday. I talk to him probably
Mm.
2 or 3 times a week, pretty consistently. Um,
Yeah. You
and
call them
we,
up.
yeah, well, he calls
He
me up.
calls you.
I can
Right.
send him messages, but
Right.
he makes this incredible beadwork, and when we go to the powwow, he sends me out with this beadwork, and I often reach out to folks in the community and share it around and sell that beadwork, and then we use the proceeds from that to make sure that he's taken care of throughout the year. Get him what he needs. And anyway, I say that to say I was embraced by the indigenous men inside in prison, and I started learning the importance of what those things meant, and really talking to
Mm.
people about culture and talking to people about. And I had grown up as a disconnected native. I'm 3,500 miles from my ancestral homeland, in a place where the most of the indigenous folks I grew up around here didn't really look like me, and definitely a feeling of being sort of like on the outside looking in as a youngster for a really long time.
Yeah.
Although I was still interested in it, I was still studied it. I remember feeling a real sense of anxiety that it was like indigenous culture was a little harder to find, in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts was ground zero for colonization,
Right.
and
Sure, sure, sure.
so finding those things, and due to a couple of family feuds that had happened, two generations before I ever came into the world, we were really disconnected from that. So starting to get the sort of crash course and connect into that while I was incarcerated was really meaningful. And when I came home, I chose to pursue, a path what is referred to as the Red Road. Like weaving indigenous medicine and tradition and culture into my life as a framework to use to take better care of myself. You
Yeah,
know,
that's amazing. It's funny because uh, there's plenty of podcasts out there today that help understand what prison culture is like.
yeah,
And typically, the way those podcasts start out is, well, I did this, I showed up, and then I had to become assimilated into this group I wasn't necessarily clicked up with before, but had to survive.
right.
And I'm sure there is probably some of that for you as well, but it sounds to me like here the universe is again showing up for Jason Vickers and
Yeah,
wrapping a warm blanket of indigenous heritage and comfort and support around you.
that's right.
So even though you're locked up and you're at this bottom, you're now like embraced in a spiritual way that can at least keep you occupied from a learning perspective, and a support perspective. I mean, it's just like sometimes so I turned 16 in about 6 or 7 days on the 8th,
Yeah,
and I've been around since the
that's
late
beautiful. I'm
90s.
really happy to hear that. Congratulations.
They
Yeah, we've seen
thank
each
you.
other's faces in rooms for a really long time.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
thank you. And I only say that not to pat myself on the back, but to say I've been around long enough to watch people that should have died about 10, maybe 50 times in their lives because I've heard their stories,
hmm,
just get wrapped in a blanket of spiritual sort of like
yeah,
power. I don't know how else to say it. I'm at a loss for words. It's just so beautiful to me. Some of us, we're here as messengers to tell our story, not to take pride in the choices we made, right?
that's
Like these things happen to us. These gifts were given to us. I could talk about, the gifts that I've had, but I've just watched so many people like you have these amazing stories where it's like there's no dude, like when you're homeless for 4 years,
yeah,
you're not capable of thinking you're going to be this like renowned Northwest icon chef that's now getting written up in Seattle Magazine that is helping people in this super unique, really cool, rich way. It's just like, what the
yeah.
F, man? If that isn't a spiritual sort of like blessing, I don't know what is. And so that's just another reason why I think your story is so cool. Can we talk about your menu for a second? So
Sure.
your menu goes way deeper than what most people associate with like Native American food. You're foraging locally,
Mhm.
working with tribal farmers and fishermen,
Yeah,
fisher people,
fishes. Yeah, that's right.
digging back centuries for inspiration. Like walk us through what that process looks like and how you develop a dish, like in terms of, I guess we're talking about research and how you apply that to your menu, because I think that's really unique about what you bring to the table.
Well, the foundation of it is this: is I grew up in the restaurant world here in Seattle, and I learned what to do with these in restaurants. I learned how to touch food, and I learned all the approaches to like I certainly won't say all the approaches, but I learned many approaches to like how to take care of things, and it became sort of just a language that I speak with my, like touching these things and working with these things just kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
in a way that other things didn't, and and to this day it's the same,
Hmm.
it's so learning how to do all those things and then coming back into the world with a desire to be healthy, a desire to really live in the principles of like healing and recovery, which means like really try to live in the concept of like passing it around and like trying to find ways to put myself aside so that I could find some sort of growth and some sort of healing.
Hmm.
Um, taking all those things and applying it to food, and and so with those thoughts in mind, I started asking a lot of questions. And I was a reconnecting Indigenous person. I grew up in very urban native. So for me, like as I got older and I found folks who would come from more traditional backgrounds who were interested and who were willing to share some of that with me. In my 40s and now in my 50s, I have done my best to develop a practice of being the newest person in the room who doesn't know something. I can sit in a room full of kids from Lummi and they know songs and they know drumming and they know how to do things. I have no I don't I know nothing about it because I come from downtown. You know what I mean? Like I'm a city kid.
Sure.
um so setting aside what I think I know and being open to taking something in from folks is really a skill that I am working to develop over time.
Yeah.
you
It's
know
really funny as you're talking about this. It sounds like you've got this almost spiritual mission to remain teachable. And because of that, that means you get to maintain like a youthful inquisitiveness. And what's funny about being questioning, like inquisitive, like a kid is inquisitive, right? Is that if you apply that to really heavy shit, like for instance, I have this exercise, it's part of the work that we do
Yeah.
where we talk about fears.
Hmm.
And the way I do it with the people that I work with is let's write out a fear, but then instead of just writing out the fear, let's write out why we have that fear. And then write out why you have that fear. And then write out why you have that fear. And then write out why you have that fear. And
Oh,
all fears,
yeah.
even if you've written
It's like a
about
little kid who keeps going, why? Why? Why?
why,
But you go
exactly.
back 3 or 4 generations to that question, it gets real interesting, doesn't it?
And it kind of, but what I'm saying is, as you were talking about,
Yeah.
doing your research, I thought about that little kid asking why and this exercise that I do and how everything leads to some root. There's a root fear. I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of being abandoned. I'm afraid I don't deserve God or a spiritual
Sure. No one's ever
helper.
gonna love me again.
No
Right.
one's ever going to love me. They all kind of drop down into these roots. And I was thinking about your research into the history of like why you would use an ingredient in a specific thing and where that comes from and where did that come from. And I thought, God damn, you could do like a whole freaking show. I'm always seeing
Sure.
opportunity when I have ideas. I'm always seeing like TV shows or documentaries. I just talked about this with Madeline, who I had on before.
Mm,
um, I could watch a whole documentary about researching the root of the menu recipe items in native culture, and
sure.
it would be amazing. It'd be like total. It's like, well, how did they till the ground? Why did they till it that way?
That's
When
right.
did they till it? What kind of ceremony did they think would help with the crop? Were they totally wrong about that? Like, how did in, weird invaders change the way they grew and or made food? How did technology change those things?
Right.
And I just think that there's like a lot of richness there in developing menu and why, and I don't think we take a lot of time thinking about our history, let alone the history of a dish or the intention of why it was made. You know what I mean? And I see that in the language of your brand, you talk about that stuff. And
Oh,
I
for
think it's really cool.
it's well, I will tell you that one of the most exciting things I've ever gotten to experience in my life is being a cook and a chef, and mid stride in my career, be introduced to hundreds of new materials to work with.
Yeah.
So there's all these different levels. As an indigenous person who's trying to reconnect, I get introduced to these elements of like the like physical elements of the world. I get teachers and mentors who see that like I can do something with my hands so I have value as a person, which is great to have somebody reflect back to you that you have value as a person. It's important, you
Yep.
know. So these people are going like, I'm going to invest time and energy in teaching these things to you because I see that you know that you can do something with them. So going on walks in the woods, and then you get to have I got to have the experience. Shout out to my friend Mark Olsen, who the first time he took me for a walk in the woods, we went up above Hoodsport up into the hills. This is down in the Skokomish territory, down just past Olympia,
I love it. I love
down
it down
in
there.
Shelton.
Yeah.
And we're going to walk in the woods. And I said, "Oh, hang on a minute." I ran back to the truck and I opened up the door and I pulled out my notebook and my pen. And he looked at me and goes,
Field
"What's
notes. Yeah.
he said he was like, put that back in the car. He said, that's not what we're doing here. And we walked through and he pointed out every plant, for a couple of miles in. And on the way back out, he pointed at him again and said, what's that? What's that? What's that? And I realized in that
Oh,
moment that I was going to. And so do you see what I mean? It
yeah.
wasn't just the education and what was happening. It was the beginning of an education of how to work with these things. And
Yeah.
education continues to this day,
Yeah,
like,
because 300 or 800 or 1500 or 3000 years ago,
yeah,
dad didn't take son out to learn about what was in the forest and have him pull out a tablet or a
that's
piece of
right.
wood that he carved in. He said,
That's right.
that is that.
Yeah,
That's what that's for. And then on the way back, much
right.
probably like you did,
Yeah,
he said, repeat it back to me. Tell me what it is. So he actually learned. He wasn't just taking in information, putting it somewhere for storage, which is what we do now, right?
right.
That's amazing.
So
I
having
wanted
a, just being introduced to that, the most exciting thing in the world was to be introduced to these new ways of looking at food and
totally.
ways of looking at the concept of people taking care of each other.
Yeah,
You know,
it's beautiful. I love it. I want to talk about some accolades. So this is sort of a two-parter. So you were the featured chef at the University of Washington, taking back the dinner,
yeah,
and that was an event during Native American Heritage Month.
that's right.
I'd love to know like what that meant to you personally, and what kind of statement you were trying to make, with the food you served.
Yeah,
And then I also want to know about Seattle Magazine covering you in the story that it was pretty easy to find online. Like
yeah.
that introduced a lot of people to your work for the first time. I want to know what that experience was like too. So first one, I really know like what kind of a statement were you trying to make at the UW Taking Back the Dinner event, and then how did the Seattle Magazine like covering you
Sure.
affect your business?
Well, here's what I'll tell you. From the to that first question, I trace my ancestry back to people who packed up 45 pound, or excuse me, 75 pound baskets of corn on their back and other foods as well, and walked 45 miles out to the coast to take care of the pilgrims in that first year. I trace my ancestry back to literally the folks who did those things, who took care of those people. And
Right.
say that to say, there's a real powerful ancestral piece that they of like of taking care of each other in this particular way, man. And so I was really thinking about that a lot as literally the concept of these words, take back the dinner.
Mm.
I come from the people who helped conduct Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving. So to be able to to be able to,
Not last year,
yeah,
but hundreds and hundreds.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. All the way back to to that meal where the times where no one was looking,
Right. Yeah.
and these beautiful, strong indigenous people, who in the midst of all that could find the generosity to take care of these folks, who were strange in many, many ways, and people were getting sick by being too close to them, and that was
Mm. Yeah.
as I'm sure
Yep.
colonization started the sort of tenderizing of indigenous people that led to them being sort of pulled from where they were, started with sickness. We
Yeah.
like something like 70 to 85% of these populations
This be like
disappeared.
smallpox, influenza stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they were European. They just that stuff, the
Yep.
diseases folks carried with them naturally, and we had no precursor for that. We had no so those things were, those things were devastating. Um, I was thinking about all those things and those stories as we did the Take Back to Dinner event, and I got to share a few words about that and really kind of create a menu around that. A lot of the menus that I build, it's very important to me to bounce resources around inside the Native community as much as possible before it goes
Mm.
anywhere else. Bound
Oh,
like
you test it.
yeah,
You test it.
bounce that dollar around, right? So I want to buy from, I want to buy from an indigenous fisherman. I want to
Oh, I
buy
see.
something from a hunter or a forager, things like that. So buying from within the community, or like exhausting every opportunity to do that before I go and sort of like, go to like a mainstream store to buy things is something that's important.
Sure. Yeah.
Very
Locally
proud of.
sourced. I love it.
That's right. I'm very proud of stocking, salmon from my buddy Scotty Rehome, and the Pinkhams brought me some elk neck, and I have in the Pinkham family from Yakima, and just like to have these things, and they have a name attached to them, and they're, and then they're some of these things you buy in a trade, and some of these things you trade for, and some things are gifted.
Yeah.
And being able to bring foods like that into prominence and share them around, and have everybody in the room have that at their table, and be able to tell stories about it and talk a little bit about it, is an experience. I will tell you that I'm grateful to do it. It feels like grace. Like you look up grace in the dictionary and it says an unexpected or undeserved gift. For me to have the grace to be able to like stand there and talk about some of these things, to have the grace to, when I was a little kid and we moved here from the East Coast, I thought, just like everything else, man. There's like I have no way of connecting to these native kids. They don't look like me. I don't look like them. I have
Yep.
this, my hair's not like this. I have this big curly hair, because where I'm from, every Afro-Indigeneity is the most normal thing in the world where I'm from. In fact, it's stranger to not be Afro-Indigenous than to be Afro-Indigenous. It's quite the opposite here. It's like I mean, it's not strange, but it's more unusual for that to happen here.
When
And
I first met you, I almost wore a Wu-Tang shirt.
mm,
When I first met you, I seem to remember you being sort of like more connected to hip hop culture
that's right.
than native.
For
I
sure.
see you now at like pancake breakfast every month, or we see each other around, and I go, it just feels more. You're presenting more native
That's right.
than hip hop Jason Vickers.
I mean,
And
I grew up as an inner city kid. I spent
yep,
my life, like writing graffiti and making art and kind of living in those circles, and those cultures were, those were the most prominent cultural elements in my life.
yep,
And I was grateful for that. Those cultures took really, really good care of us too. We growing
yep,
up in
yep.
circles was a beautiful thing. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
Seattle Magazine. How did that affect your business? Was it like really quick? Like, was it
sure.
like,
So, so,
whoa?
so, so with Seattle Magazine, one of the other things I do besides food is I'll tell I'll just share a real quick story.
Yep.
I lived in 2009. I lived in New York City. Right before this was before my partner at the time became pregnant, and I was just working with food and kind of being curious about food. And I was working with some folks to get ready to like open up this thing. So I was making this sorbet, and I made this raspberry rosemary sorbet, but I put a little too much sugar in it and it wouldn't set up as a sorbet. So I had this syrup in my fridge,
Right.
and I just kept it, and I was like, this is going to be good for something. And we were sitting out on the stoop one day, and it's just a beaming hot day. It's like, we're in New York City, and the sun is beating down, and it's humid, and it's hot. And we're just sitting and we're just talking on the porch. And I was like, with a couple of the dudes from the neighborhood, we were living in Crown Heights, so it's a really interesting neighborhood. I loved it was an incredible place to live.
Sure.
A real Caribbean neighborhood, all the Caribbean grocery stores and all these folks in the neighborhood. And we were sitting out there talking, and I said, hang on a minute. I went upstairs, and the inspiration just hit me. I lined up some glasses, in went some ice, and went a little bit of syrup, and I poured a little club soda, and it stirred them up. And I came down with a tray, and I offered all these, like, we're kind of been living in the hood, and and there was about half a dozen of us there, and I handed out these sodas, and we all sat there and drank these raspberry rosemary sodas, and just had this moment of, it was as hip hop as anything, man. Hip
Totally.
hop to us was always like you like clean dressed and dirty mouthed. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
we can be who we're from, but like we take care of ourselves and we present. So I sat down and we had this like really fly. Like let's just be fly today.
It was a
And
classy moment.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
when it came time to start working with these materials, there were so many plant medicines, interesting things. As I started to taste things like this, this is what I mean about like mid-stride in your career being introduced to new things. Like the creative opportunities were and continue to be unbelievable.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and it turned out some of the best ways to interpret some of these plant medicines, whether it was cedar, sweetgrass, hibiscus, so many of these bear root, sassafras root, like so many of these things. Sumac was through like making syrups.
Yep.
Making syrups and making concentrates and then making drinks, and not only making like handmade sodas, turning them into mocktails. For those who are so inclined, turning them into cocktails, and I did an event. I want to shout out a woman named Valerie Seagrass. She hosted an event last year, a food symposium for Indigenous people called Native Grown and Gathered.
Oh,
And
cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I got to go to the symposium and offer these syrups. And at the time, I had 9 different flavors of syrups.
Hmm.
And these syrups contain they're you know cedar tangerine syrup, sweetgrass apple blackberry syrup, and honey nettle syrup, like
Yeah.
all these different flavors, and they all come from particular experiences or introductions to plant medicines or lessons or just long walks in the woods that I've had with folks. I make one with wild ginger harvested from the Skokomish reservation that I call Skokola,
Do you sell these on your website?
I absolutely do. Yes, I
Yeah.
sell them. I sell them. I sell them in a 4 ounce size, in an 8 ounce size, in a 32 ounce size, and all the way up to a 64 ounce, like a half-gallon size. And we sell them to folks who want to have a couple for themselves just to enjoy. Whether people keep a bar or a mocktail bar at home, just to kind of stock with that. And then what's interesting now is the phenomenon that's growing across the country. I'm really really incredibly like grateful to say is there are a lot of native coffee stands, a lot of resi coffee stands, out in native communities are reaching out and ordering the syrups because they
Oh, cool.
want to serve these plant medicine based sodas and use them as coffee flavors as well. So
Yeah, I'll make sure that your website's in the link like right away after the description for sure. That's
But
awesome though.
so I went to the symposium and I shared a little bit of my story that we've shared here. And there was a woman from Seattle Magazine in the crowd and among this group of people during the conversation, and she came up afterwards and asked if we could do this again. And I shared my story with her, and I got to have the experience of kind of going and sitting with a photographer in a studio and bringing some syrups and
Yeah.
and and I'll say again, I'll say it again, like starting from waking up underneath that tree in front of Dick's.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And slowly building and ending up incarcerated, coming out of incarceration, getting to work with some friends and some of the wonderful organizations that we're close to and affiliated with,
Yep.
and like walking out this road of being able to there was nothing in that moment when I woke up under that tree that would have told me in any way that I could embrace that this other thing would happen now. That
Yep.
my life that I would be able to say that I'm close with my daughter, and that and I'm just as close with my family has been reassembled in this way, and that I get to bring something useful into community and share it around, and that as an Indigenous person who felt completely on the outside with no prospects of finding their way in, I'm really grateful to say that I am surrounded in community, and
Yeah.
I exist in a
That's
place.
awesome.
Yeah, it's a really great, man.
I want to talk about fry bread really quick and
The
and the
great controversy. All
and
right,
the complicated history behind it. And I don't want to spend a lot of time because I know that we need to we're approaching at least an hour right now, but I'd love you to explain like that story and why it matters to you, that people understand the difference between survival food and traditional Indigenous cuisine.
That's right. So here's what I'll say is the simplest version of most Indigenous American history goes like people who have existed in a certain piece of land or certain area for thousands of years had that live in harmony with the patterns of those places, the seasons, the plants, that it's so familiar with it, in fact, that they're all involved in a relationship. It's not about squeezing something out of the land. It's not about whipping the land into, like, making the land my bitch. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not about pimping the land. It's like we're all here. We're all here to take care of each other. We're all here to take care of each other. Like, in Indigenous traditions, they say, all my relations. It's the most basic term. Mitakuye yasin, as the Lakota say. All my relations, and all my relations means everyone and everything that I'm related to,
Mm,
which means like not only so it's not only like my personal relatives, but my relationship to other humans and my relationship to this land and my relationship to what just and all and how everything is connected. And living in this way, and within the course for most people of one or two generations, getting snatched out of that and put into a situation where they're pulled from their ancestral home and put usually into a place like, let's be honest, like most reservations at the time, people could be pulled from where they lived and they would usually be put in a place that sucks. You know,
right. Yeah.
the land sucks. That's it's quite literally not where I'm from. So if I've existed in this place where I have this long relationship with what's happening in and around and on the land, and I'm put somewhere else where we don't have that, how the hell am I going to take care of myself?
Mm, okay.
I've like my people for 100 generations, 1,000 generations have lived, have walked through these seasons. Like we're in a dance with nature, and these see like, and it's the most natural thing and most beautiful thing in the world. And now suddenly we're kind of snatched out of that and we're put somewhere else. And the
So can you
American
draw the connection for me to fry bread question?
Sure.
Like,
So
yeah.
The American government shows up with commodities. The American government shows up and goes, "We know you used to hunt. We know you used to fish. Here's what we got for you. We have here's some food.
Yep.
Here's some bags of flour. Here's some sacks of coffee. Here's some sugar. Here's all these things." And most of them were things that like folks knew very little about or hadn't really had much exposure to. But in their innovation and their ingenuity over time, they took these ingredients and started putting together, making these combinations, this very simple dough that they would fry in lard,
Mm,
and make a food out of. So this is this so the story of fry bread is kind of steeped in something painful like that. But like most cultures in America, we know about like soul food, about things like chitlins and collard greens and these like foods that represented like the scraps of what someone else might have that people could turn into a delicacy. And fry
yeah,
bread exists somewhere on the continuum of things like that. So
I
I
get it.
so the complicated present tense relationship with fry bread is um, fry bread is identified as, first of all, it's sugar and flour and it's fried in grease and it's so not the healthiest thing and in the world to eat. It's a couple of times a year at powwow, maybe on a special occasion,
Sure.
sure.
Yeah.
A little bit here, a little bit there, but it's so I say those things to say it's struggle food, and for those reasons, a lot of people like a lot of natives aren't a very big fan of fry bread, and they're not very excited about folks eating it. I'll tell you that as a kid, hanging around in indigenous circles, like going to powwow as a youngster, you would see. I remember seeing like almost everyone over 40 was obese and had diabetes, and people were starting to lose limbs and go blind, and all those things that come from like I have this body that I have this DNA that's built to like live in a certain way with a certain kind of land and eat and live and exist in a certain way. But instead, we're dealing with McDonald's and sugar and flour and butter and like canned pork and margarine and government cheese. Um,
Well,
and
the story of like the health of the food and the history of why so many of us eat bad stuff, it definitely exists in all of culture, in every
for sure.
culture, especially in today's sort of globalized, supply chain, right? But is your message more for that sort of that First Nations or Native person reintroducing themselves to culture, as to like why this isn't really that great of a traditional food? Or is it more to like, I'm also hearing like, hey, hipster new chef, don't serve this because it's actually kind of an insult. Like, what's the point of the conversation beyond it's not that healthy?
Right. It's beyond it's not that healthy. What it represents, I mean, it definitely represents folks trying to do their best they can, being dealt a pretty nasty hand. So for a lot of indigenous people, the history and the culture around it isn't great.
Yeah.
Conversely, in its own way, the native country is full of aunties and grannies and uncles and grandfathers who are like famous for their fry bread.
Right.
You
So
know,
yeah.
they make it
It
so well. So when you're inside the culture, there are places where treasured, and and for a lot of natives, it's really nostalgia food.
Yeah. Right, right,
Um,
right.
but
I
but
understand. So what
but
you're saying is it's complicated is
it's
really the point. Yeah.
the point is it absolutely is it's complicated, and it's like it's the dictionary definition of it's complicated. Yes.
All right. So just getting close to wrapping up. I'd love to like really quick, what's the hardest part of building the Tonks Metsu? Like what'd you have to figure out on the fly? And maybe just a one or two things like versus all of it. Like I know you're a personal chef. I know you've essentially cultivated some products that you can sell online. You can sell your services, you can do events. But what was like, was it just your natural business stuff, getting the word out, or was it like help me understand? I think with the listening to that chef that's thought about creating their own personal chef business,
Yeah.
like what was the most difficult hurdle you had to get over before you're like, all right, we're on our way?
Um, Simply put, it's like this. I have had to, on the go as an active business owner with a business that is rapidly growing, and I say this with absolute gratitude, um, is flourishing. As a person who is, we have described it in so many ways, and in so
Yeah.
many parts of this interview, this conversation about being wrapped in this blanket of love and care. You know, whether it's from like the folks around you. I got sent to prison, and it turned out to be the greatest gift that I was given. A chance to turn around and be in this other way. Being embraced by Indigenous people, and recognized as somebody who had something they could do, so they were worth teaching something to in this way. All of these things. At my core, I'm an artist. I'm a person who likes to make things and think about making things. That's what I love to do. I like to
Yep.
make things. You know what I mean? Like my kitchen is like it's my kitchen is like it's like my art space here. Like it's just another place to like make things and experiment and tinker with ideas and have fun. The subject matter I get to work with now is so beautiful and kind of holy in its way.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, being able to be an artist in a studio, sort of making something, is an incredible way to be. For me, codifying that, turning that into recipes, and turning that into menus, and turning that into business plans, and turning it into, like paying taxes, to hiring a half a dozen employees, and now I have six personalities in one
Yeah.
small space, and we need to
Yeah.
sort of like learn to sort of coalesce with each other. Those things have been very challenging, but
Yeah.
but what it really is like each one of those things, if I'm being honest, are important lessons that I was due to learn about how to walk through the world in a better way. Because underneath it, Rory, I want to just say this to kind of like encapsulate this stuff is one of these important principles of walking on and existing on the red road, like being an indigenous culture, are the principles of things of like being in harmony with the world and
Yeah.
taking care of each other. So I say that to say as this thing started to grow, like oftentimes I'll find myself in a place where I'll get out of tune with what's happening like in the world, or I'll get out of tune interpersonally with the people around me, and the work comes in where it's like, and it's always the same, and
Yep.
it's so the principle we learn, like stop and like the answer is only ever going to be humility. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Only it's
Hmm.
only ever going to be, let me look for the place where I've gone a little bit astray and see what lesson I need to learn. See what part of like see what piece of my pride I need to lay down. See what thing I need to do to be teachable and make space for something new. And I'm going to tell you, Rory, and one of the last things I want to say to you is the gifts that have come. I have been given so much more than I would have ever imagined that I deserved. And that's
Sure.
like again, like screaming definition of grace. I made a lot of decisions based on what I thought my wants and needs were, and I went out of bounds culturally. I went out of bounds societally, and I got punished for that. But in the end, I got gifted a chance to come and be with other people who had made mistakes like that and go in a new direction. And the gifts that come tumbling down the line are unimaginable. I mean, there's things that I could like, I have found some people that want to do such really cool and fantastic, interesting things with my products that will get a chance to expose them and offer them in ways I would never have imagined.
Right.
And it just keeps happening. And so right now, the most important thing I'm doing with my business is taking time and being methodical and being intentional about creating a vehicle, creating a vessel to hold the opportunities that are that are on their way. Like I can see them. They're right there. Like they're
Yep.
on their way. So it's like my friend Yvonne Monique likes to say, how good can you stand it?
Right. Right.
How good can you really stand it?
Yeah.
And I've learned that like I like this and I'm grateful for this and being able to have something to share with generations coming down the line. Uh, Realizing at 53 years old, I've accumulated a bunch of this information, but that doesn't mean it belongs to me.
Yeah.
That right now I
Sure.
get the opportunity to pass that on to somebody else and again, like I said, try to create a vessel to hold these good things that are coming because it's worth doing well. Man, I
You're
woke up
so
under that
funny.
tree, dude, in
I
front of Dick's.
I ask
Right?
you a question about what's the hardest part of like what was the hardest hurdle, and you can't answer it because you're looking at everything. I think your answer is like, don't worry about that. Your
Yeah.
answer is like, look for opportunities to learn. Anything that happens isn't a big deal. It's just another learning opportunity.
Yeah,
And
the
and
answer
I
is look at what kind of human being you are and what kind of human being you're being. So the most difficult thing and the most rewarding thing is like is in, as far as this business goes is each and everything is an opportunity to go inside and ask some of those questions. And I have had the opportunity to work with like and I didn't and I want to be really clear. I didn't invent these concepts. I have been blessed with people who have medicine
yeah, you've
people
learned them.
incredible
Yeah.
experience, sponsors and mentors and all these people who have all this experience who have given me the opportunity to have it shared with me.
Yeah, that's
You know?
awesome.
Yeah.
I think this is a perfect place to wrap. I am going to make sure that Natoncks Metsu is put in the description, that everybody can like go check you out, check your products out, and if you're local, maybe even like bring you to cater an event.
That's right.
Um, and man, Jason, what a great episode. I don't think we've ever gone this long. And the question is going to be like, what do we cut out of it, if anything? So thank you so much, man. Any final thoughts for the audience, especially personal chefs?
Especially personal chefs. Lean in, like be curious about your culture. Ask your family to go back into the generations and see what matters to you guys most and look into it and
I
have some
love it.
fun with it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jason. And I'll talk to you soon, man.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate you.
All right, bro. Talk soon.
This was great. All right, man. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.